The first thing when you come into boot camp, right before it, they give you a web page where you can choose your own phone, your own Unix name and laptop. So on the first day, you already have a computer that's ready with a dev server that's dedicated to it. What does that mean? It means that now that I've chosen my gear and they had me like a name on the shelf, my computer doesn't have anything on it. I don't have to set up anything or install anything. I just have a dev server I connect to with SSH, and all the code is there. So basically, if I'm working on web development on www, I don't clone any repo and I don't install anything. It's already ready for me to go on and have some impact. So I can access it with SSH in terminal. I can choose to do everything from terminal, of course, but we also use as an IDE Atom and also Nuclide, which is an open source package that Facebook develops, has a feature of remote connection. So basically, I'm working on my own IDE, and I don't even feel that it's actually syncing with the server the whole time. But what's more interesting is that when I want to use my web browser to go to the dev server, I take my Unix name, which is Ranbena. I add the .sb to it, .sandbox. So if I want to take facebook.com and go to the dev server version of it, I just take the Ranbena SB and I put it in there. And if it's messenger.com, then I squish that in there. And it's just the development environment that I have at the moment. So out of the box, there's no setup being done. It's all done remotely. When there are upgrades to the server or changes to it, I don't have to have my laptop even on. I just get an email saying that there's maintenance being done in off hours, so it's super convenient. I have remote access from anywhere. So if I'm using my own browser, it doesn't really matter what browser it is. That URL I showed you before, I can take from my phone and I can test it. I can take that URL and I can share it with someone else in the team so they can try out my new feature. It doesn't have to do with my laptop. It's super convenient. It's using remote resources, so my computer's CPU, memory, and disk space are irrelevant. And also, it's pretty much a lot more secure, so if I misplace my computer, all I have to do is revoke the remote access, and then I don't have to fear anything. And I know what you're thinking, that if I have to have internet connection in order to work, then what happens if I don't have an internet connection? And you're right, and it does sometimes happen. But from my experience, it's just it's a non-issue. All of these things that I get from it by having a dev server are really amazing. So let's go on to the next one. Something that's being talked, not only Facebook does it, something called monorepo. Google does it, Twitter does it, also Etsy and DigitalOcean, from what I know. Basically, when we have projects and we have dependencies between them, we usually use submodels and we use microservices. But here, a monorepo simply means that everything is under one file tree. So if I want to create a new project, I just create a new folder or a new file, and that's all it takes. It's a conscious choice that companies make, and I want to tell you about some of the gains from that approach. Now, I've seen videos and articles on monorepos, advantages and disadvantages. You can go and see and deep dive into it. I just want to show you a few upsides that I feel as a developer. The first is code sharing. Since it's all one project, all the classes, all the methods, all the utils are accessible. So there's less chance of code duplication and re-implementation of the same code. Also, team collaboration is really, really easy since everyone's code is accessible. So I can search for something and it searches the whole code base. Code mods, which is short for code modifications, if we want to maybe refactor the whole code base, we can do that in a single operation. For instance, if the performance team thinks that we should move to a new way of creating arrays that are more performant, they don't have to talk to any person on the project. They just do it themselves. And they do it in a single operation, knowing that there was no chance of ruining builds or tests because it's just like landing any change. And they don't have to worry about backwards compatibility at all. Another thing is bug fixing. Part of the culture of Facebook is that you can touch on anything, and you're expected not to wait for others if it's not necessary. So if I use someone else's code and it has a bug in it, or maybe I want to augment it, I don't have to ask him to do it. I can do it myself, and then maybe I can add them as a reviewer and make sure that nothing breaks when I do it. So committing codes, and you want to push it into production, we use with something we call diffs. Basically, if I'm starting my day, I start with in-terminal arc-pull, which basically fetches all the updates on the repo and rebases my current branch. I perfect my changes, and let's say I want to take the blue bar on top, and I want to change it to green because I think it's going to bring more attention or something. Then I use Mercurial for it, hgcommit, just like Git. And then I arc-diff. It starts some pre-commit validations, creates a pull request called a diff, and everything went well. It's going to spew out this URL with that ID of the diff. So if I click on it, I'm going to see this web tool, this diff web tool, where I can see everything inside of it. The author is me. I chose maybe my own team to be reviewers or individuals that I think can contribute to the discussion about this diff. I automatically, new strings that come into the project are auto-detected. So basically, that kicks off the whole translation process, and I can click a button to make that happen. Builds and tests. If I break anything, like sanity tests, unit tests, I'm going to see it here. Same goes for lints. And there's going to be a real big green button saying ship it if it was accepted. And if I click it, I can see the whole landing process right in front of me in this view. So I'm going to scroll a bit up. There's the summary. This is where we put in everything that has to do with why we chose to implement it in this specific approach, so that the reviewers will know why I chose this and for prosperity, and also a test plan, what they have to do to patch it so they can reproduce it themselves, and what exactly they need to test, and of course, putting in unit tests and WebDriver tests and the whole shebang. So I blurred out the code. You can't watch it. I'm sorry, but you know what this is. This is where we do the discussions on all kinds of parts of the code, and eventually, we either comment on it, or we request changes, or we approve the diff. And before we click on ship it, we make sure that lints pass, test pass, that translations are ready, or people are going to see the default English, which is not good. We have the responsibility of putting in logs to make sure that we're not breaking anything once we hit production, and also logs to make sure that the feature is actually going out into production, and kill switches. If we put that in, then we can kill it immediately if the experiment is over or if we see that something went wrong. So we use something called feature gating when we release something into production. We have a very useful tool for that. So basically, once a feature is ready and you want to turn it on or off or decide on exposure percentage, you can put it as conditions in the code. So if you want to expose a feature only to Americans, then you have that inside. Or maybe if you want to expose a certain promotion from someone who came in from the homepage, you'd have that there. Or maybe just have a kill switch. But having all that in the code is cumbersome. It takes hours to propagate into production, and you have very limited visibility. So instead, we let separate configuration do that for us. So all I have to do in the code is ask gatekeeper, this is my feature, should it be on or off? So it just spews out a Boolean. And in another configuration tool, which is called gatekeeper, I can do something like this. I can say I want 100% exposure to users with these IDs. So basically, I'm going to be the only one that sees this. Or maybe I want to open the feature up to all of the corporate IP devices, but for public, only 10%. And then I can do it incrementally until it gets to 100% if everything goes well. Maybe I can take a look at the query string, and I want ref to be homepage, and only then the feature is up. And one last example is I want this feature open only for Opera Mini and touch devices, so I can stack them, I can have them one over the other, and it's super, super convenient. And it propagates into production in a matter of minutes. So if I want to kill something, if I want to up something, if I want to change the conditions, it's all in config. It doesn't take hours to land, and I love it. Dog fooding. Dog fooding refers to the process of allowing internal beta testing from actual employee devices. This is not like a Facebook thing. A lot of people use this, a lot of companies. But it means that you're not using a test device to test stuff. You don't have to install certain builds if you want to test beta builds or experimental features. We use Gatekeeper on the products that are only installed on employees' devices. So as developers, even before it hits production, we can get signals on health, logs, crash reports, even to see if metrics go the right way from thousands of devices and platforms very early on in the development stage. And since this is not a Facebook-made concept, nor is it a corporate-related solution, even at my previous company, which we were maybe only a few dozens of developers and we had a small beta group of testers, we set up dog fooding and got valuable feedback very, very early on. So I encourage you to do that if you can. Now, in a company that aspires to move so fast, communication is really, really important. So sharing information, for that, email will just not cut it. So instead, we each have an employee profile in a kind of an internal Facebook called Workplace. This is publicly available as an enterprise solution for companies. It basically means that it's Facebook for work. I can create groups, internal events, I have mentions, I can have bots, I can make the whole thing searchable. And at Facebook, we take groups to the extreme. We have groups for features, for products, for technologies. And I don't have to really be a member of that team to be a member of the group. And we encourage that. If I am really interested in React VR, but I'm not working on it, I can just subscribe to that group and see the whole discussion. Also, I can be a beta tester on groups. So only when you subscribe to a certain group, then suddenly that feature is exposed to you, and then you're part of the discussion as a forcing function, and it's incredible. But also, we have groups for all kinds of things, for coffee lovers, for movie buffs, for sports fanatics, and it's all searchable because somebody already asked it at some point, and it's super convenient. We have a lot of celebrations at Facebook. Visitors that come in do Q&As and tech talks. We have posts for visitors that come to TLV, so they're not strangers when we walk by them, and to initiate conversations. If someone had a Faceversary, an anniversary at Facebook, we have like a balloon celebrating that, and we post it to everyone. And we instant message each other on a daily basis with Messenger for work. Basically, instant messaging is a legit way to contact anyone. No matter what the seniority, we can talk about anything, and I've done this a million times. If someone said something at Q&A that rubbed me the wrong way, I instant message him, and we talk about it. Anybody at leadership, anybody who's interesting, if there's a feature that I really want to know about, I can contact anyone, and it's very, very legitimate, and it still amazes me. One last thing about communication is something that we call HPMs. It's a tradition at Facebook that it's not a requirement, it's not a must, but we do that in my development team. Basically, HPM is highlights, people, and me. It's a periodical post that you put into a specific group where you talk about highlights, what I've done this week with links or images that have to do with it, what I plan to do next week, people, new people that came into the team, and maybe I want to share some private stuff from my own personal life, and that's basically what I do. It's important so that everyone in the company is up to date on anything that has any value, because you get so many groups, so many notifications. This kind of sums up what happened this week with you and with the product that you're following. And it's really handy to have it as a history log, like a chronological log of whatever you did since you came into the company. Next up is hackathons. I don't have to tell you what it is, of course. We do this in every engineering site several times a year. We see it as an opportunity to let employees touch on anything at Facebook. You can put your tasks aside for a day or two, and you can experiment with anything. So I added features to Messenger. I did some work on internal tools. I did some stuff for hackathon tooling as well. I did a lot of stuff that didn't work eventually, but it doesn't matter. I tried new technologies. It's all legit. We do have a theme, but you're not imposed to follow it. It's rich in swag. There's food, there's a celebration, and there's a show and tell at the end of the week. And sometimes, some of the projects are even presented in front of Mark and leadership, influential people in the company. This is from a live stream from Facebook headquarters in Menlo Park a year ago, where Ohad, an engineer on the Facebook Lite team in Tel Aviv, demonstrated his hack. And one last thing, it's one of the beautiful aspects of the hackathons is that there is no hackathon organizer at Facebook. Basically, it's led by a group of employees. Any employee, if it's an engineer, a designer, whoever wants to be a part of it, makes it happen. That's it on hackathons. There is another hackathon-ish thing that we call fixathons. Basically, knowing that the company strives for impact, that means that sometimes your code is suboptimal. There's that hard-coded thing that you put in there that you know you wanted to change sometime, but you never got to it. Stuff that's not optimal in performance, or just ugly code that you don't want anybody to ever see. So basically, we have this week. It could be called a fixathon or a tech debt week, where you put everything aside and you, either as an individual or as a team, you go for something in the code that you wanted to change for a very long time, or stuff that's legacy and you wanted to remove it. Now, people that knew about what I'm going to talk about said that, if I talk only about things that I love, then it's going to look kind of weird. So, and asked me to talk about something I don't love, and sometimes they don't have that brand of coffee that I'm used to, and I have to wait until they replenish it. But on that, there's something called on-call shifts. Now, there is no way that anyone would say that they love on-call shifts. Let me fill you in on how this works. Basically, it's impossible to push safely to production so frequently without having a solid safety net. And one of the biggest problems that I experienced, especially in the previous company where I was in charge of automation, is that the people that were in charge of monitoring, there was a huge disconnect between them and the people that actually worked on the product and maintained and monitored it. So the disconnect makes it really hard for dashboards to stay relevant, for people to actually be available when something needs their attention, and not having a true point of contact when some other teams need some clarification about code or about the product. So at Facebook, every team creates and maintains their own dashboards, their own alerts. We set the thresholds and define the severity of them. And basically, we have rotation between us on a week where we put everything aside, and we're just monitoring, and we're the point of contact, and maybe we take some low-end, some stuff from the log, and we use them as tasks for us. So for instance, if let's say I find a bug on reactions, on the reaction feature. I can post about it in the reactions feedback group and let them know, but if this is something critical and nothing at Facebook is somebody else's problem, then I can actually use a tool to see if someone already reported it. I can see who's the on-call for that specific feature at that time, and I can instant message him and see if he's available, and if not, I can assign a task that's severe, and I know exactly who to assign it to, because someone is on call on that team. Last thing, about feedback. One of the things that always bothered me as a professional was when the notion of a team member review always got deprioritized. I had this in every company I was in, that you just want to know that you're okay, and you want to know what you can improve on, and you want a basis of telling that to someone else or even the company. So, but there's always something more important to focus on, and it always gets backlogged. So Facebook puts tremendous effort into allowing its employees to give and get feedback on a regular basis in multiple ways. I'm not going to say all of them, just 2 of them. One is employee company. Twice a year, the company asks for anonymous feedback through a survey that's sent to all employees. It does this in order to achieve precise and up-to-date evaluation of how the company feels about itself. You're being asked about the products, about the mentality, about visibility, communications, the state of mind, benefits, and also hardships. And also we have the notion of peer-to-peer reviews, where I can ask someone twice a year, there's a block for it, where I can ask people that I work with all over the company to give me a review. I want to know what I can improve on. And we all encourage ourselves to communicate anything that we see valuable so we can be our best. And it does so with tons of respect and with great, great intentions. So that's it for my talk. I love talking about Facebook. I want you to come over. I'm going to be at the booth. Please don't talk to me about policy stuff or world domination, but I do want to talk about everything that has to do with engineering, anything that has to do with recruiting, and we are looking for really, really good people, especially front-end developers. Let's talk about culture, about the internal culture at Facebook, and also anything that has to do with the mission and the vision. I'm kind of the guy to talk to about that. Thank you very much.